Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this roundtable that the New York State Senate is hosting today. I'm proud to be joined by my co-hosts, if you will, Senators Kevin Parker and Diane Savino. This roundtable is about the important issue of crypto mining, its environmental impacts, and the role that cryptocurrency industry plays in New York State. I really want to thank everybody for being here today. Right now, the only people that are able to see this are those who are participating in it. This is not being live streamed anywhere, but it is being recorded, and the senators will make a decision as to who to send this to or whether to publicize it when we're through. But for now, we certainly want this to be a frank and open discussion. So first, we're going to hear from some of the members. Then everyone will introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So I'd like to kick this over to Senator Kevin Parker to welcome everyone, and then to Senator Savino. Emmett, you'll unmute Kevin.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Please do not let the leader of the conference know that you've been able to shut me up, because they'll never they'll never let me talk again. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to particularly thank my colleagues, Todd Kaminsky and Diane Savino, for not seeing it robbery to bring us all together to have this important conversation. This is an important conversation from two fronts, both obviously from an ecological perspective, but also economically. And these things are inextricably linked, as we're actually understanding and realizing. I'm really anxious to hearing folks' perspective. More importantly, I'm really interested in hearing solutions on things that we could be doing to both continue to have a policy and movement in the state of New York that moves us towards environmental justice and one that reduces our carbon footprint, while simultaneously creating the economic opportunities that our great state needs and deserves. Despite what many people think, and despite my passing of this legislation last year, I am not anti-crypto currency, nor am I anti-crypto mining. But I certainly think that it should happen in a environmentally sustainable way. And so I'm hoping that this conversation will lead us to a place in which we can start working on a path towards both of those mutually beneficial ends. So again, thank you all for being here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Senator Parker. Senator Savino.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues, Senator Kaminsky and Senator Parker. Senator Parker and I have been in the Senate a long time now. Senator Kaminsky, not quite as long as we have, but during our period in the Senate, the world has changed tremendously and so rapidly. And just think of how quickly technology has changed everything about the way we do things. And unfortunately, government has not kept up with the rapid pace of technology. And we often think about New York State as being the financial capital of the world. I mean, everyone associates New York with Wall Street, and so where does cryptocurrency fall into that? But then it's not just the future of the cryptocurrency; it's how does it affect our environment? Senator Parker spoke about the bill that he passed last year. I chair the Internet and Technology Committee. I actually voted against that bill because I believe we need to take a more nuanced approach to addressing the issue of crypto mining. Because if we're going to remain the financial capital of the world, we cannot put roadblocks in the way of developing policies with respect to cryptocurrency and crypto mining. One of the challenges that we face is explaining to people the very complicated issues around cryptocurrency. What is a Bitcoin? What does blockchain mean? New York is a really interesting place. Sometimes we lead and sometimes we follow. 24 states have legislation in place that allow for things like blockchain technology. New York is not one of them. We passed it in the Senate 3 years in a row. The Assembly won't take up the bill. These are really complicated areas that cross over not just financial policy, environmental policy, the future of the world of technology, and I think it's really important that we flesh these things out and come up with ways to make sure we remain the financial capital of the world and also the leader on environmental justice. So I look forward to this conversation today, and I know we're going to kind of dig deep and get to some answers that I think will make sense for all of us.
Yeah, I really appreciate those opening statements, and I echo a lot of those sentiments. You know, I obviously was the author of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and our global, our blueprint to have a carbon-free electric sector and a carbon-neutral economy is obviously critically important. And any big decisions we want to make have to fit in that. But does that mean that putting it into crypto mining is consonant with that, or are we causing more harm than we need to? I think these are important topics to have today, and I'm really delighted to have Senator Thomas here, the head of the Consumer Affairs Committee and a fellow Long Island senator here, to just give us some brief opening welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Todd, for putting everyone together to talk about this very important issue. Thank you to Senator Parker and Senator Savino for all their leadership on this matter, as well as the chair of Consumer. This is, a very important policy, interaction that we are having right now. Like, what does the future of crypto hold here in New York? What can we do to make it better? And, where does all of this come together, consumer protection and making businesses profitable? So looking forward to this great discussion, and thank you so much for hosting this.
My pleasure. Senator Amar, are you here as well?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm driving. Can you hear me all right?
I can. If you want to say a quick hello to folks, you're on.
Yeah. Just thank you, Chairman, for putting this together. This is a very important topic, particularly with a brand new mayor of New York City coming in, wanting to make New York the crypto capital. It's a very timely issue for us to be discussing, and certainly the environmental impacts that have been discussed around these issues. So I look forward to the discussion today. I am a little perplexed why somebody from the mayor's office of New York City is not on this forum with us today, since he's expressed such an interest in cryptocurrency, and that our New York State Department of Environmental Conservation doesn't appear to be on the witness list of this forum today either. So I wish they were participating, but I look forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, so the mayor's office is here today.
Okay.
They are here, and DEC is watching as well. So we and the governor's office as well. So we do have good overall participation, and I'm hoping Senator Boyle can say a quick hello to us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this roundtable. I think that this is a vitally important topic. I'd personally like to see New York at the forefront of this new industry emerging, and rather than sitting back and going a little too slow. So I commend you for doing this and look forward to the information.
Thanks so much. Assemblyman Vanel, thanks for being.
Senator Kaminsky, thank you for hosting this roundtable, and I see the thank the Senate for also for doing this, and I see Diane Savino, the chair of Science and Technology here, and everyone else. What's great, is great the fact that we are, you're hosting this roundtable so that we can figure out, how to make sure New York leads in this space. When we talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, the technology was first introduced to the world not so long ago, on October 31st, 2008, in a white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. We don't know who that is, but at that time, they explained what blockchain technology is, this new thing. And what's really interesting was we did not know how, the world did not know how to figure out how to create digital scarcity, how to create currency digitally. And part of what they did was describe that through blockchain technology to democratize a way where people can participate, where folks can participate in the process of this thing, this new thing. And this is the first time in our lifetime that we have a new asset class. And part of what happened to be able to create that digital scarcity was you actually have to do work. You actually have to do something in order to validate that. And that process is what we're facing now, right? When the network is growing so much or what have you, it's going to take more and more work, more and more energy to be able to help validate these processes. One thing that's great is that this industry is a new industry. We're only talking, 13, 14 years old. So we have to make sure that we minimize the externalities. But at the same time, New York must lead and can lead as the financial capital of the world, must lead in this space. And we have to make sure that we minimize externalities, but also figure out how to lead in this space. So, thank you for hosting this. One of the things that we did in New York State was we passed a digital currency task force to be able to study this very issue and many issues. And we can talk about that later on. But thank you for hosting this, senators.
I appreciate that. And in the few minutes since you brought that up, I was able to read the white paper, and I appreciate you showing it my way. I did a quick read, a quick Cliff Notes version. So I want to, it is, I think anyone wanting to know that should go back to that original white paper, though. It is very, it really hasn't strayed so far from where we are now. But I really want to thank everybody for being here. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a lightning round, no more than a minute for each person to quickly say who they are, what they're representing, why they're here. We're not going to get into any of the arguments now, but I want everyone to be familiar with the other participants. Because the good thing about a roundtable as opposed to a hearing is I want there to be a lot of respectful cross conversation. And I'm going to ask each of you to reply to some of the other arguments, depending on what side you might fall on. So let's at least introduce ourselves, who everyone is. We're going to start with Elizabeth Moran. Please say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me today. Thank you to all the senators here and assembly members for hosting this. My name is Liz Moran. I'm the New York Policy Advocate for Earth Justice. And I am here today to urge the Senate to once again pass Senate Bill 6486. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Brian Bullitt. We're going to unmute you in a sec.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairpersons Kaminsky, Parker, Savino, for the invitation to participate this morning and for your leadership in evaluating this important, exciting, and somewhat uncharted territory taking shape in New York. My name is Brian Bullitt. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Bitdigital. We're a leading publicly listed and sustainability-focused Bitcoin miner headquartered in New York City. And we understand that to be successful, we must drive innovation and economic gain for our state and do so in a sustainable and eco-friendly manner. Senator Parker, you recently were interviewed on Yahoo Finance and stated that you're focused on crypto facilities with long-term plans to utilize sustainable energy, and that you want to work with miners to do what's right for their business and also the people of New York. We couldn't agree more. We want to work together on the same team. And if there's one message that resonates with this roundtable today, it's that it is correct to demand that New York's digital mining industry take shape in a manner that contributes to long-term economic and environmental benefit of our state. And Bitdigital would like to be a leading partner to help achieve and shape these goals for the future. So our company welcomes this discussion, and we have the commitment to environmental sustainability and the track record to prove it. And we look forward to elaborating.
Thank you, Brian. Eric Weltman.
Hi, folks. My name is Eric Weltman. I am a Brooklyn-based senior organizer with Food and Water Watch, and along with dozens of allies from Long Island to Buffalo, we're very concerned with the environmental impacts of crypto, proof-of-work cryptocurrency mining, particularly the burning of fracked gas in the Finger Lakes and elsewhere that's being used to power this process. We're very grateful to the Senate for passing the moratorium last year, in particular, Senator Parker, for your leadership on this important issue. And we certainly have every hope and expectation that you'll do so again. Again, as I mentioned, we're part of a movement spanning the state, which embraces everyone from SEIU 1199 to vintners in the Finger Lakes that are calling upon the state to not only stop the power plant projects in the Finger Lakes and in Buffalo, but establish a moratorium on this process. Thank you very much, Senator Kaminsky, for inviting us to be a part of this roundtable.
Thank you, Eric. Amanda Fabiano.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for providing me with the opportunity to testify here. My name is Amanda Fabiano. I'm the head of mining at Galaxy Digital, a company based in New York. Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining should be held to a high ethical standpoint similar to other industries. And Bitcoin mining uses energy, yes, but the energy that it uses is allowing it to secure the network that supports a robust ecosystem of businesses and investors. And so the industry as a whole, we really have been trending towards more transparency, especially with the advent of public companies listed in the US and the Bitcoin Mining Council, of which we were a founding member. We hold ourselves to a high standard for our own mining operations. We currently utilize electricity with over 69% sustainable energy mix with a 3-year target to achieve over 80%. And I believe as an industry, we've been trending towards identifying solutions to the perceived problems in this space. I thank you for your time, and I really look forward to continued dialogue and being a resource on education and on Bitcoin mining.
Thank you. Longtime environmental champion, Rich Schrader.
Thank you, Senator. Rich Schrader. I'm the Policy Director for the Natural Resource Defense Council in the Northeast. And our key concerns, of course, are abiding by the CLCPA, the landmark climate law that the state legislature in New York really both introduced and shaped, and is probably the strongest law in the country, and most important in terms of things like greenhouse gas emission reductions. And anything that doesn't abide by that is going to be very, very problematic for us as we move forward in this, as well as the environmental impact statement that are critical, I think, to any kind of movement on how to make judgments on these types of policies and these types of programs, projects.
Thank you so much, Rich. We're next going to call on Michael Amar from DigiHost to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. We choose Buffalo strategically, as I'm living in California, for the hydropower, one of the largest hydropower plant in the US, to make sure we use most of our energy in a green and sustainable way. We printed publicly that over 90% of our source of energy today has been zero emission, all green. We see Bitcoin mining really as blockchain and a data center, not more or less than every major growing company like Facebook, Amazon, Google. And we believe that we have a mission which will eventually reduce carbon emission. So there are statistics, and we can prove that long term, by 2025, 2030 will be negative carbon emission and have a sustainable energy. We are on demand with the grid, and many times we interrupt our energy in order to help and provide energy when it's really cold, like it was yesterday, for instance, or during the summer when it's really, really hot, and the grid, with no notice, takes our energy for 4-8 hours in order to supply electricity and provide air conditioning to the community. So we are number one on demand with the grid, and the grid appreciate us. We sign a program with the grid, and we feel that besides the great future of blockchain and AI, using renewable natural gas, which is the most sustainable source of power today, is beneficial for communities. So I embrace the, what Brian from Bitdigital expressed, and we're here to work with everyone, the environment, and try to improve and definitely be green.
Thanks, Mr. Amar. We're now going to call on Roger Downs from the Sierra Club. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, and thank you, Senator, and all your colleagues for holding this event. My name is Roger Downs. I'm the Conservation Director of the Sierra Club Atlantic Chapter. We are a volunteer-led environmental organization of over 50,000 members statewide, dedicated to protecting New York's air, water, and remaining wild places. And we have thousands of members from the Finger Lakes to Buffalo that are very engaged in fighting the resurrection of zombie coal and gas plants to become Bitcoin mines. And I want to stress that the legislation passed by the Senate last year and the Assembly is contemplating only places a moratorium on crypto mining that is attached to fossil fuel development. We have incredible concerns if we're going to meet our climate goals that we are not sapping off renewable energy resources to crypto mining as well. And I think that the state has to set standards. We are not against crypto, but we are very concerned about meeting our climate goals. And so I'm really looking forward to figuring out in this debate today how we do that, how we work together to make sure we're achieving those goals. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. Matthew Homer.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Matt Homer. I am at a venture capital firm called NICA Partners. We invest in fintech companies and in cryptocurrency companies. And immediately prior to that, I was in the New York State Department of Financial Services, where I was the executive deputy superintendent for innovation and looked after regulation of cryptocurrency in the state of New York. And very excited to be here. I think we've seen that the cryptocurrency market is here to stay. The market has communicated that, and we see growing retail and institutional adoption. I think it's important to recognize that the retail adoption that we see within the cryptocurrency space is not what we see in other areas of fintech or financial services. Actually, the populations that have been left behind by traditional financial services are finding value in the cryptocurrency landscape. And as a state that is as diverse as New York, I think we need to recognize the utility that crypto is bringing to our state's diverse population. And so I'm excited to be here, part of this conversation, and talk about how we can find win-win solutions for the people of New York and for the environment in the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. For the Seneca Lake Guardian, is that Mr. Campbell? Is that you?
Yes, Senator, thank you for hosting this very important roundtable discussion. My name is Joseph Campbell. I'm the president of Seneca Lake Guardian. We are an organization, an all-volunteer organization that's been over a decade now protecting the Finger Lakes' pristine air, water, and the community character, our way of life from threats by various industries. And we're host to one of the most egregious examples of how fossil fuel fired proof of work blockchain technology is climate busting, has no place in New York State. We have a power plant on the shores of Seneca Lake that was mothballed for over 6 years, and it was repowered to burn fracked natural gas for the sole purpose of mining Bitcoin. And it's completely inconsistent with the New York climate law, the CLCPA. And we're asking our elected officials to take this very seriously. This can't be a town by town fight. These companies come in and spread money around and promise, bread and roses. And it's up to individual citizens and groups like ours to bring this to the attention of our elected officials. And we're calling on our state elected officials all the way up to and including Governor Hochul to put a stop to this, at least for long enough for us to study the impacts, both environmentally and financially on the state of New York.
Thank you very much. Julie Stitzel.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks to everyone for hosting this roundtable. My name is Julie Stitzel. I am the head of Bitcoin policy for Cash App, which is a business unit within a company formerly known as Square. We now go by Block. Block is a global technology company with a focus on financial services, and we build tools to help more people access the economy. Aligned with our company's purpose, Block believes that Bitcoin is an instrument for economic empowerment, providing a way for anyone to participate in the global monetary system. In New York, we have 10.3 Cash App customers in the state. For those who aren't familiar, Cash App is a mobile app that allows customers to buy and sell fractional components of Bitcoin, and they're also able to send it to their peers for free. So at Block, we believe that there is a direct relationship between Bitcoin and our ESG efforts, and I look forward to this productive conversation.
Thanks, Senator Serino. I saw you just came on. Can you please say a quick hello for us?
Yes, thank you so much, Senator. Sorry I didn't get on at the beginning. I had a meeting in my office and just hopped on now, and I look forward to listening to what everybody has to say today. So thank you for hosting.
Thank you so much. Jeff Kurt, please.
Hi, can you hear me now? Hi.
Yes.
This is Jeff Kurt. I'm the CEO of Greenwich Generation. Greenwich operates a power plant in Yates County. It's a community of about 300 people, a village of Dresden. We converted our facility from coal to gas. Unlike, contrary to the comments that were made a few speakers before, the facility was started as a merchant power plant. It was started before the regulations even existed that would allow a power plant to mine Bitcoin on site. We are one of the few power plants or a few Bitcoin mining companies in the country that are regulated. We're regulated by the EPA. We're regulated by the New York State DEC. We also have to fall within regulations of the grid operator in New York, the New York State Independent System Operator, or NYSO. We do consume power on site for Bitcoin mining. Every megawatt hour that we consume on site is approved by the grid operator expressly. And all of our emissions are governed, our greenhouse gas emissions are governed by the permits that are issued to us by the EPA and the New York DEC. We welcome this discussion. We think it's overdue. We think we thank the committee for having this forum. We think that this discussion or debate should not be presented as one where to be pro-environment, you have to be anti-cryptocurrency. We look forward to having a discussion. We support the CLCPA, and we're willing to do our part, as we've said, just to help the state meet its CLCPA goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Next to Mike Collier from Foundry.
Thanks, Senator. Appreciate the invite to come today. My name is Mike Collier. My wife and I were born in Western New York, in Rochester. I'm proud to say I went to the University of Buffalo. Spent 20 plus years of my career in traditional businesses, and 4 years ago started to learn about blockchain technology. And I pivoted my entire career to follow this space because I believed in the potential it had to level the playing field, redistribute wealth, and really create a new financial system for the world. And I'm excited to be building a business here in Rochester. So I'm the CEO of Foundry. We support decentralized infrastructure. We support miners in North America. I had the chance to participate in the public hearing in October. And at that point in time, I said, oh, we generated 65 high-paying jobs in Rochester. Today, I can say we've generated 85 high-paying, high-skilled jobs in Rochester, New York. It's pretty cool to be building a leading-edge company in Western New York. It doesn't happen very often. We're focused on hiring people from New York. We're recruiting people to move to New York. We're hiring students from the local universities. It's a great thing. And I'm here today because I believe Bitcoin mining can actually be a catalyst for New York to reach its climate goals, as well as be a leader in the country around cryptocurrency. And I'm really nervous that a vote against Bitcoin is really a vote against Bitcoin mining is a vote against Bitcoin, and it's a vote against blockchain technology, and it could severely set New York State back. And I think it's great that you guys are taking the time to learn more about the industry and the space and the impact it can have. And I'm a firm believer that Bitcoin mining will lead us to a world of sustainable energy. And it's exciting to see how that is playing out across this country, and can share stories about that and what we're seeing in the industry later today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. John Blattmacher.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to all the senators and assembly people who've gathered us all here today, and thank you for everyone for participating. It's great to see a real diverse set of views on this topic. You know, I think every one of us has a different way that we feel like we can go forward. I'm the Deputy General Counsel at Inx Limited. We are a digital trading company. We have both a cryptocurrency side and a digital asset security side. We had the first token to be approved by the SEC. We IPO'd last year. And previously, I was the virtual currency chief of the New York State Department of Financial Services, and I worked with Matt Homer. I've had a chance to talk to many of you before about this very topic, so it's good to see you all again, and good to see some new faces. I think what everyone is really looking for here is a balance. I've certainly been an environmentalist for longer than I've been a crypto in the crypto industry, but I think there's a way that we can come together and meet and have a green way forward in Bitcoin and in blockchain in general. And as I said before, you know, this can feel like a town by town fight, but this is really a global fight. And one of the things I'm interested in is keeping New York at the center of the conversation and allowing an industry that could be green to flourish here. I'd much rather have green energy used to mine Bitcoin than dirty energy in Texas or Tennessee or any place else in the world. The miners are going to go where the electricity is cheap, and we have it cheap and green here. So I'm hoping we can find a path forward for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I'm really glad you're here. I want to welcome an old friend, Addie Jenny, former colleague from the Assembly. Glad you're here. Please tell us who you're on behalf of.
It's great to be here, Senator, and thank you all the senators for participating and members of the Assembly. I am the legislative counsel for the New York State Association of Electrical Workers, which is essentially the construction locals for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. We are building every type of generation in this state, including wind and solar, and as well as fossil fuel plants. And we hope that zero carbon generators are also really part of this discussion. That's a different roundtable. We have opposed the moratorium approach to this issue and urge a different approach so that Bitcoin can be cryptocurrency mining can be seen as the opportunity that it is. I believe that crypto mining can be leveraged to help us meet and exceed our CLCPA goals while providing good construction jobs, good high-tech sector jobs in New York State, as well as other related benefits like building out broadband to every corner of this state, shoring up local property tax values and revenues, as well as helping to build consumer confidence as we transition to an electrified society, and also understand the importance and the role of New York in leading the way as these types of goals that New York has set are adopted in other states, demonstrating that economic growth can occur simultaneously, and also with an eye toward the issues of national security that I think are also implicated in the discussion about cryptocurrency. Thank you for having us. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Addie. I now want to call on Andrew. Andrew, you'll tell us how to pronounce your last name, please, so I don't insult you by messing it up. But you were on. We're going to unmute you in a second, Emmett, and you were on the mayor's transition team for tech. So we'd love to have you introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. My name is Andrew Roche, pronounced Roche, like Shea Stadium, and I'm here in multiple capacities. I'm the founder and president of Civic Hall, which is a community of people focused on using technology for the public good. I'm also the chairman emeritus and board member of the New York Tech Alliance, which is now a 60,000 member trade organization focused on diversity in the tech industry. And we represent startup founders and people, the rank and file people who work in the New York tech community. And we feel very proud of the fact that over the last 12 years, we've managed to raise the profile of the New York tech community on a national level to help people understand that it's a very different culture and a very different working environment than Silicon Valley, and that the values and the interests of our community are much more focused on equity and diversity in technology. And as you mentioned, I most recently was the co-chair of Eric Adams' Transition Committee on Technology. You've all heard that the mayor has expressed an interest in making sure that New York City, and I think by extension New York State, is a leader in the growing crypto industry. And I'm proud to see leadership from him on this issue. And I believe that there's a opportunity here to create a path for both a sustainable crypto mining and growth of an industry that would create not only high-paying jobs, but making sure that those jobs reach a diverse population of New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you. Spencer Marr. Spencer, can you hear me?
Okay, sorry. Okay, I should be good now. Hi, everyone. Spencer Marm, the president of a company called Sangha Systems. I'm a fourth generation Brooklynite, actually, and I founded Sangha Systems in 2017 while working at Sustainable CUNY, focused on renewable energy and energy storage public policy. And really, we founded it on the basis of the recognition that Bitcoin mining has three attributes that make it uniquely well suited to catalyze increased investment in renewable energy. One is its just sheer volumetric consumption of energy. The other is its extremely high load factor. And the third is its interruptibility. When you study energy markets and energy public policy in the way that we have, we ultimately recognize that Bitcoin mining cures a lot of the ills in the transmission and distribution systems and enables projects that would otherwise not meet the economic standard for large capital pools to get behind them, to get over those humps, so that, I mean, we believe that Bitcoin mining actually stimulates the proliferation of it really accelerates the transition to a fully clean energy grid. My sympathies are with those people on the call who are environmentalists. I'm an energy first person more than I am Bitcoin, and I've always looked at Bitcoin as a low-hanging fruit that allows us, it's a means to an end, and that end is a fully digital, fully decentralized, clean energy-based economy. I will fight to the death for that argument. We really see this as the path forward. We have an extremely large facility out in Illinois because it's been difficult to go after large projects in New York State. I am all for the moratorium insofar as it would prohibit the further use of fossil fuels. And I would like to see that there, but on the other hand, I'd like to see increased focus on incentives for specifically solar in the state. So I look forward to hearing everyone's views, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And I know Spencer mentioned death in his comments. There'll be no death in this panel at all. Death will not be discussed or happening or anything like that. No violence, no death. Professor Howorth.
Thank you, Senator. I took a minute to unmute myself there. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm a professor at Cornell University. I'm an earth system scientist. I'm an expert on climate change effects and also on greenhouse gas emissions, particularly from the oil and gas industry. I published the first paper ever looking at the greenhouse gas footprint of fracked shale gas. I've continued to work on that for 14 years now, and I'm the most cited scientist in the world in that area. I'm also one of the 22 members of the Climate Action Council, which is the body charged under the CLCPA with coming up with an implementation plan for the CLCPA. And I'm very pleased to say that we released just over 2 weeks ago, we released our draft implementation plan as required by the CLCPA. It'll be under review and public comment over the coming months to a year. But just to remind everyone, the CLCPA requires that we reduce greenhouse gas emissions statewide by 40% within 8 years from now. Very ambitious goal. The implementation plan we came up with, which is unanimously adopted by all 22 of us on the council, will do that, but it will be a great challenge to do so. And I firmly believe that having crypto mining operating off of fossil fuels will make it far more challenging to meet those. So we just shouldn't do that. I also do share the concern that Roger Downs raised earlier, that even if crypto mining is run on renewable energy, that it's going to be competing with the increased amount of renewable energy we need to meet the CLCPA goals. So that may not necessarily be the case, but it'll be a challenge. And I'm happy to be part of that discussion today. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Professor Maloney.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Maloney. I'm a professor at Fordham University School of Law, and I'm going to be a term lecturer at Wharton School of Business this coming year. I teach Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, business, and regulation. Until recently, I was the CFO at CoinMint, the largest Bitcoin miner in previously North America, but now the largest in New York State. It's 100% renewable, powered from the Moses Saunders Dam and a former Alcoa aluminum smelting plant. While I was there, I led the development of that former Superfund site, and I grew the company to be one of the largest employers in St. Lawrence County. Very familiar with New York State regulation around power and Bitcoin. So NYPA, NYSO, NYSERDA, I've worked with all of them, as well as had some comments previously on the New York Bit license. Before Bitcoin mining, I was at Galaxy Digital as a managing director of transaction advisory. I've been in the cryptocurrency industry since 2011. Before that was in New York City Housing Authority. I understand the burdens that are on both the crypto side as well as the environmental side. I'm a New York City resident. All of my family are Buffalo Steel workers. So I understand the lines we have to cross between regulation, energy, green, and generating new jobs in the city, in the state. So I'm very happy to be part of the conversation. I'm an active speaker on everything Bitcoin mining. So this is kind of bread and butter, and very happy to be here.
So Professor Maloney, because you are the last one to introduce yourself, I'm gonna start the conversation with you and Professor Howorth, and then we're gonna ask people to raise their hands to jump in. I'm gonna ask everyone to limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and I will come in and cut you off, and please do not take it personally, but we have a large, diverse panel. We've got smart elected officials here. People cannot give their view of the world for 5 minutes, or we'll never hear from everybody we want to hear. So please limit it to 3 minutes. Professor Maloney, give us the vision of what it could look like to have sustainable Bitcoin mining that is consistent with the CLCPA in a world where environmental concerns and a growing digital universe and economy can coexist. Is that a possibility, or are we headed for a collision?
Well, it is absolutely a possibility. However, there's a demand and a need to do more on both sides. I'm sure many people are familiar with the most recent initiative that's been done in Lower New York to generate 4 gigawatts more of green energy for New York City consumption. However, that's less than 2% of the energy needs that we'll need in New York State over the next 5 years. The gross majority of New York State's energy is actually green, or possibly green, but it's concentrated in parts of the state that have lower density populations. So with Bitcoin mining, currently in New York State, between 600 megawatts and 1 gigawatt by my estimate, we're not actually taking up a large amount of the total generation capacity for the state. What we need to do is start to work on not only the development of more green energy in higher density areas, which Professor Howorth was correct in saying that that could be competitive for Bitcoin mining, but we also need to support the generation in lower density areas. I mentioned Messina, but there are also areas such as Plattsburgh, other regions across the state that are predominantly green and could benefit from these jobs and these productions. Working hand in hand with NYSERDA, we should be using the tax base that's generated from this to start to upgrade our grid in the state as a general perspective. And I say that because we can't bring the energy from Messina down to New York City. It's just not feasible or possible, even with battery production or transfer production. But if we use the tax base to generate new green energy, we would be essentially doing a long-term play to move this energy out of rural trapped communities into more suburban and urban communities. And also we would be more likely to secure our grid. Someone earlier commented about the brown grid down of Texas. Well, we all saw what happened last year in Texas, and that is feasible to happen here in New York State. If we upgrade our grid now, we would be protecting it, allowing for more efficient energy transfer, and also have more security in the long term. So I'm going to pause there and pass it to Professor Howorth.
Okay, thank you. First and foremost, as I mentioned in my brief introduction, I just don't think we should be allowing or encouraging the use of fossil energy in New York for crypto mining. That just is going to make a really hard challenge to meet the goals of the CLCPA. I hope that most of us can agree on that. So then the real discussion I think we should be focusing on is how much renewable energy we can put into crypto, whether it will help overall meet our other energy goals or whether it will compete with. And of course, it can compete. Perhaps we can envision a way to make it complementary as well. But currently our upstate grid, if you will, is about 10% fossil driven and 90% emissions free. That's about half of the electric use in the state. The downstate grid, New York City, Westchester, Long Island area, is overwhelmingly fossil fuel driven right now, and we need to move aggressively against that. And of course, offshore wind, as the governor is pushing ahead with, is a big help for that. Bringing in hydropower with dedicated cables down the Hudson from Quebec will be a big help. We do need to upgrade the grid. I agree completely with Professor Maloney on that. We need to have better interconnections across New York. The Climate Action Council has made that a major recommendation. But we also need to recognize that not only do we need to green, particularly the downstate grid, as we move fossil fuels out of heating of homes and buildings, we're moving to beneficial electrification. As we use less fossil fuels in transportation, we're moving to beneficial electrification. So we're going to need a lot more electricity. And by 2045, 2050, our projections from the Climate Action Council are that we're going to have to produce about 35 to 40% more electricity than we do at the moment, and that all has to be green. So whatever we do with crypto mining is, at some level, is competing with that. Maybe there's a win-win where we can help crypto with the financing of it. I'm not a financial expert. I'm an expert on the emissions, but I am concerned.
Thank you, Professor. We're going to go to Addie, then to Spencer, and those are the hands up I see right now. Addie, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's extremely important for us to be focusing on the limitations of siting a lot of green energy generation close to the city, and that we have to focus on upgrading the transmission system. I agree wholeheartedly. But also the recognition that we have to address intermittency, which wind and solar absolutely have, and the need for there to be reliable energy generation, whether it be a zero carbon generation or a limited amount of fossil fuel generation that is strategically located throughout the state to ensure that as we electrify the state, that customers are going to have the energy that they need to heat their homes and for businesses to run. The problem, well, one of the benefits of using or converted generation is that they're already hooked into the transmission system. We probably don't need to upgrade those, but you can't site a huge solar farm oftentimes near where existing transmission is because you just don't have the space. And then you get into local government issues. Crypto mining is very flexible and is very transportable. And so we could be helping to finance you know, green energy generation in places where there isn't transmission yet by co-locating cryptocurrency mining operations near them. I think it could help us build out much quicker. And then it's also there in place for future technology to come in as well in terms of storage or other types of generation. So we had to understand the reality of we're going to be building these things where nothing exists right now, and cryptocurrency can help us get it there. And as another member said, help finance the transmission upgrades to bring it to the market.
Thanks, Addie. Spencer?
Sure. Actually, that was a good point to build off of. I recently had a conversation with one of the large solar developers who has been working on a project in Texas for over a year. And as they were midstream through the development timeline, ERCOT, which for us it's NISO, had let them know that there was going to be too much congestion on the transmission lines for them to otherwise get the project off the ground. And so they approached us to help understand how they could right size a particular type of Bitcoin mine that would allow them to monetize the hours that the grid was going to need them to curtail. So it's important to also point out, as operators, there's a wide spectrum of types of infrastructure and types of machines that can be deployed to fit a given deal context. So, you know, in that case, they didn't need for us to propose them the best Bitcoin miners, the ASICs themselves. They just needed something that was good enough that when they wouldn't be able to sell onto the grid, they'd be able to monetize you know, the production of the facility. And so we look at this as this, you know, the stakes to that conversation are, this is a 250 megawatt solar facility that would not otherwise have been built. So it will be built. The generation will go towards being sold into the merchant market. And the Bitcoin mining is actually what's going to make the difference there. The other point I wanted to make is just that, you know, here we are on a Zoom call. There is a back-end data center where something physical is happening and energy is being consumed as a result of us all being on this call. And so even if it wasn't the Bitcoin mining, just the digital future will necessitate these forms of high energy density campuses, even if it's not for Bitcoin mining.
Let me, thank you, Spencer. Let me, before going to Liz and Rich, let me just ask whether Brian Bullitt or John Blattmacher want to take this.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. Thank you, Senator. You know, Addie, Spencer, Professor Maloney have all pointed to something here that I'd just like to frame a little bit more broadly, and that's that there's really a very exciting vision here that we shouldn't lose sight of about innovation related to crypto mining's ability to catalyze the creation of new sources of renewable power that otherwise would never get built because, as Addie mentioned, they're located in the middle of nowhere and don't have a customer and don't have an economic base load. Transmission, as she mentioned, is also a piece of that. But Bitcoin mining by its nature is a very unique power user. Our computers can run almost anywhere with an internet connection, so they can be deployed where the renewables occur in nature. And that potential power is often far from obvious users, and so the sources stay untapped. But because we're portable, miners can go to the source and become the base load and the economic catalyst to unlock new renewable projects that otherwise would never get built. And we're seeing that, as Spencer pointed to. This isn't just an idealistic vision, it's actually already happening. And we're seeing it on a large scale in countries like El Salvador, where they're tapping their geothermal reserves to not only decarbonize the entire country, but to use Bitcoin mining as a key economic driver of that infrastructure plan. And I actually spent time down there with their government, and that was an amazing validation of this concept. Just on Monday, Reuters reported on a hydro plant in Costa Rica that was going to go offline, and it got a new lease on life thanks to Bitcoin mining. And we're also seeing it in some Nordic countries where they're also studying massive new hydro projects, where again, mining is envisioned as an economic catalyst. And in this country and other states, we're seeing energy companies also moving in this direction, envisioning Bitcoin mining as a way to catalyze development of new renewables.
So let me throw this in then, and then we have a bunch of hands up. But so we do, though, right now, John, have Bitcoin mining that is not using renewable energy, but that is using traditional fossil fuel energy? How should we be thinking about that, and how do we move past that, and what are the barriers to moving past that?
Sure. I mean, the barriers, I'm sure, are, among other things, it's cheap electricity, right? Like the miners are generally going to go where there is cheap electricity, where it's cheaper to operate. And I would like to see a time that we move away from them. But if the plants are operating within regs and they are creating jobs and they are not a large net contributor to the carbon problem, then I think that's good. I do think it's worth all of our whiles to figure out a way to continue to use the renewable energy that New York has. From the St. Lawrence and Niagara rivers, there's a ton of untapped energy in communities that need jobs, in communities that have been, that just look at the population in Rochester and Buffalo and any place upstate, and it's just been going down essentially since World War II. Here's an opportunity to stop the brain drain, to really empower upstate New York and places that have been sort of forgotten by the wayside, and also places that naturally have that green energy and that are cold, that go hand in hand with crypto mining.
Okay, we're going to go to Liz Moran, then Roger Downs, then Professor Maloney.
Thank you so much. So I would like to acknowledge what others have, is that no one here is expressing opposition to cryptocurrency or the value of cryptocurrency. But we are concerned with a particular mining method, and that hasn't really come up right now. All of this discussion is currently around proof of work cryptocurrency mining. And that's only one way of mining for cryptocurrency. This is the methodology that unfortunately is the most popularized at the moment, but it doesn't have to be. I can list off a number of other ways cryptocurrency can be mined that do not use nearly as much energy. Proof of stake, proof of authority, open representative voting, federated consensus, proof of activity, proof of burn, and that's only a subset. There are more. So there could be a lot of innovation when it comes to other ways to mine cryptocurrency that simply do not consume the same level of energy. And I have to note that and really emphasize it, because one of the first principles of addressing climate needs and making sure we can ramp up renewables to meet needs has to be cutting overall statewide energy consumption. And that's acknowledged within the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. There is an explicit goal to reduce energy consumption statewide, 185 million British thermal units by below 2025 projections. So that's another goal that obviously is smaller, doesn't always get brought up when it comes to the CLCPA, but it's one that we still absolutely need to meet. And I really am taking tremendous concern with the idea of renewables would never be built otherwise if there wasn't this demand. We have to create that demand, and that's part of what's being expressed in Governor Hochul's State of the State address. Renewables are not currently meeting our existing energy needs, and that's what needs to be prioritized first and foremost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to do Roger Downs and Professor Maloney, and then we're going to kick it over to Mike Collier and Andrew Roche.
Actually, I thought Liz asked a good question. Could we open it up? I would just love to hear. It seems like we're mostly represented here by folks involved in Bitcoin or some proof of work platform. I would just love to get some commentary on what's wrong with proof of stake or why that.
Professor Maloney, you want to take that?
Yep. I was actually going to jump in on consensus methodologies there. So proof of work is by far the most used because it is Bitcoin. And from a decentralization platform, it is also the easiest to ensure that there is decentralization.
All right, so Professor Maloney, just to stop, make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
To do Bitcoin, there must be proof of work. If you say no proof of work, then there's not going to be Bitcoin mining in New York.
There would not be Bitcoin mining in New York if New York banned proof of work. Full stop.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Now, there are other consensus methodologies. Liz Moran just lists several of them. I want to emphasize that from a per capita use and transaction volume, they are much different than Bitcoin. And when I say that, proof of stake is largely untested. The Ethereum network has been working for several years to move to proof of stake. There are other layer 2 or secondary blockchains that use proof of stake. However, they're largely centralized. So one of those a different consensus methodology. With EOS, there are only 21 validators. So when we move an economic system away from centralized authority, Bitcoin effectively is saying that anyone can participate. It is a fully open network. Proof of stake methodologies are a step down from that, where it's anyone who has funds, but then proof of authority is essentially the same system that we would use before. This has been something that's been argued in the Bitcoin and blockchain communities for several years. It's more of a cryptography problem, but the benefits of proof of work as a unique structure have been around since 1991 when Hashcash was involved. So this is the kind of thing that we may not like proof of work, but for Bitcoin, it is here to stay and can never move away. It just, factually, it could be scaled down. And we have seen periods where Bitcoin has lowered its hash rate. And so this is going to be one of those things where the development of new hardware technology and the development of new green energy will be a cyclical cycle where we're going to see that increase. But I don't think New York State should take a position on proof of work, because you would effectively remove over 45% of the entire cryptocurrency market from being dealt with in New York State, full stop.
Thanks, Professor. Mike Collier.
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting point that people love to bring up, is like, oh, let's just move to proof of stake. So our business, half our business is proof of stake, right? So we support Bitcoin miners. We also support 20 plus different protocols on the proof of stake side. We run nodes in the cloud to support those protocols.
And this is for Mike and for everyone. You start throwing out acronyms and stuff and protocols, like assume no one knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, so different tokens, different coins, different ways of reaching consensus. And I think the key thing for this committee to get their head wrapped around is proof of stake is fundamentally different than proof of work. And with proof of stake, it really is driven by the original founders. And it basically allows the venture capitalists to monetize these networks. So it's essentially the rich get richer with proof of stake. And there's some very interesting technology. There's some exciting things that happen there, but Bitcoin is fundamentally different than that. And it allows anyone and everyone to participate. It redistributes the wealth. I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity around the proof of work concept, and it requires energy. Like at the end of the day, it just requires energy to secure the network. It is very scalable on the proof of work side. So this idea that it requires more energy to send a Bitcoin transaction is just false. I mean, people that state that don't understand how the network actually works. So I think it's dangerous to think that, oh, you can be in support of proof of stake and not proof of work. It's
Mike,
yeah.
So we hear your point on this. What is then wrong with saying, hey, crypto miners, we get it, proof of work is here, but do it in a renewable way. Stop using fossil fuels and stop. What's wrong with that?
No, I think that's a very fair thing to say. And by the way, the Bitcoin algorithm is written in such a way that the miners are incentivized to go find the lowest cost. The lowest cost energy is renewable energy, and that's where Bitcoin miners gravitate towards. You know, there are definitely unique situations around the world where people have taken advantage of a coal-fired power plant in Kazakhstan because it's the only thing that they've got there, right? The guys down at Greenwich, look at Greenwich is a peaker plant for the grid. New York State pays Greenwich to be available to support the grid so we don't have rolling blackouts. We need that power plant right now. What we're seeing in places like Texas that have built enormous amounts of wind energy, these energy companies are now reaching out to us, to the Bitcoin miners, saying, please come, we need a large base load that's intermittent to stabilize the grid. It's critical. It's going to be part of the electrical infrastructure. So for New York State, I want New York State to be 100% renewable energy. You know, we're going to build a lot more wind. We're going to build a lot more solar. You're going to need Bitcoin mining to be there, to be that stabilizing force to balance the grid. And it's going to require a 10-year transition. If we vote against it now, we're going to set New York backwards in our goals to be sustainable.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're going to go from Rich Schrader to Andrew Roche.
Thank you, Senator. Can you hear me? A couple of quick points on this, and I'll only take a couple of minutes. One is what's irrevocable is the CLCPA has already begun to reshape policy decision-making, economic decision-making, legal decision-making, and overall broad economic development decision-making. It's happening. DEC, in its decisions regarding not providing permits to the Astoria plant, to Dance Camera, to the Williams pipeline, all cited the CLCPA and cited issues in terms of climate beyond just the usual clean water and clean air concerns, which for decades DEC, of course, has tied all those decisions to. My point here is that the CLCPA has very clear metrics, as Professor Howorth said and as Liz said. One of them is a 100% clean energy grid by 2040. That clean grid means wind, solar, storage, also includes nuclear and hydro. It doesn't include gas. So like everyone else, every other development, every other economic platform that you're thinking through, gas is not going to be in the future of New York State after 2040. That's the way it's going to play out. And that's the part of the CLCPA that's vital, because that's what's going to begin to really kick down the greenhouse gas emissions and get reductions there. So this industry, like all industries, have to look to that. And that's how we look at any economic development projects going forward at NRDC. Secondly, you've got by 2030, a 40% required reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And again, if you don't apply that kind of set of assumptions and that kind of set of goals, you're outside the CLCPA guidelines. I personally think that, and again, this is not an issue about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, which there may well be a really important component here as far as the futures, in terms of New York State's economy. But the key element here is you can't be providing this kind of broad and very expansive use of electricity and abide by the CLCPA. One of those tools will be the EIS, and environmental impact statements are something that we've used for many years, both in the state and also with private interventions in the NRDC. So that's part of the bill that we looked at last year as far as the moratorium, and one that I think also is of real meaning in terms of moving forward on this. But unless we're looking at the ability for the industry to see that CLCPA will not allow fossil fuel usage overall after 2040, I think that's a discussion then that we have to really just clarify right away. Now, I think Professor Howard's concern is also important. What happens in terms of renewables? Is that going to be pulled aside, and is too much of that going to be put aside for what's a high electricity and energy usage industry? And that's a real concern too, because we're going to have some limited renewables as we move forward over the next 15, 20 years. That's a policy decision we have to think about too, as far as looking in terms of the future of the industry here.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thanks, everybody. I'm not a cryptocurrency expert, but I'm fascinated by this conversation because of the, and I don't mean this pejoratively, competing perspectives related to this topic. And it seems to me that one of the challenges that we all face is that the terminology that we're all discussing here is somewhat limited to this group or to the people that we work with daily, and that there's a larger population of policymakers and the public itself that needs to have a better understanding of what's at stake and how these technologies actually work. And so I would highly recommend that before any legislation is argued from either side here, that we bring in additional perspectives and potentially additional experts who could provide subjective information. For example, economists who could take a look at the long-term impact of these technologies on the workforce, whether it's environmental jobs or whether it's fintech jobs. Where are the benefits on either side of this argument? It seems like we're still a pretty small group arguing an emerging market at a moment when the environmental risks seem so high. And I'm worried that, in a rush to try to come to a consensus on a way forward, we're not including more voices and more perspectives than are available to us right here on this day and in this discussion.
Who should we hear from?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think that we should be reaching out to particularly underrepresented populations to get a perspective from them. in terms of what the benefits of this technology may be for example, the unbanked and those that are excluded from the financial system already, which is a regulated industry, but it does not provide equity across all the different economic classes in New York State. And I also would I just want to just point out, I mean, take a look at, there's the percentage of people of color on this call is not as high as the percentage of people of color in New York State. So from that perspective alone, you can see that we need more people at the table to be discussing this.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Seneca Lake Guardian, then over to Julie Stitzel.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. To piggyback on what Liz Moran said, we're not anti-cryptocurrency. It's the proof of work model that's energy intensive, that's in our case, a power plant burning fossil fuel to mine Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not as egalitarian as it began. It's now a rich man's game. In order to be successful mining Bitcoin, you need tens of thousands of these high-powered computers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And while Greenwich was originally permitted as a peaker plant, it's no longer operating as a peaker plant. It's operating almost exclusively to mine Bitcoin. In their S1 filing, Greenwich stated to their investors that they want to install, they have 17,300 machines operating now, and they want to install 32,500 of these things. And that will consume about 95 megawatts of their 106 megawatt capacity. As far as green energy is great, right? We have some pretty lofty goals in New York State as far as greenhouse gas reduction, emission reductions. And in order to meet those goals, we need every green electron going to the grid so that people can power their homes, so that we can power vehicles. We can't spare one green electron for rich people to get richer mining Bitcoin.
Thank you. We'll go to Julie Stitzel.
Thanks. I just had a quick point on the debate between proof of work and proof of stake. I think it would be great for the Senate to consider taking a technology neutral approach. So when you start talking about different consensus, it's sort of like saying we prefer Apple over Android. And so considering that point as you continue to debate this is something I hope you will consider doing.
Thank you. Assemblyman Van Helden, can I ask you a question since I know you know the space very well? What is your reaction to the comments? And I'm not setting this up for anything. I'm actually curious that crypto is a rich person's game, and this is still the 1% on Wall Street. What do you see crypto's opportunities to be? Does it have the ability to lift other people up? Should we be looking at it as something we want to expand to broaden economic opportunity? Or is every time someone is running a crypto mining project, it's going right into the pockets of someone on a yacht somewhere?
You know, Todd, great question. Now, you know, what's interesting to me is that I first was introduced by cryptocurrency by my younger brother. And what's interesting is in order for people to participate in investing, in order for people to participate in the traditional investing, you have to it's difficult to be able to, you have to start off with, you know, $10,000, $3,500 or what have you, and be approved or what have you. And in order to participate in this market, it's the barrier of entry is relatively very, very low. And also one thing that's interesting in this space is that, you know, it can help connect the unbanked and underbanked. Again, it's not a panacea for everything, but, you know, we need to be able to be, you know, when we're looking at how to make sure that we get folks that are outside of the traditional economies to participate into these markets and to participate in investing, cryptocurrency has been doing that. What's also interesting too is that, you know, if you walk into my neighborhood, you will find, you can find like Bitcoin and other kinds of places where people can buy these things and exchange them. And that's happening in our neighborhoods or what have you. So it's interesting to see this and have this conversation. And Todd, we have to make sure that and it's great, I forgot who said this before, we have to open up this conversation to more people to be able to make sure that we truly participate with more people in New York. Oh, Andrew, Andrew, you're definitely right about that, brother.
I appreciate that. We're going to go from Jeff Kurt to Eric Weltman, please. And then so it'll go Jeff Kurt, Eric Weltman, Brian Bullitt.
I just wanted to point out regarding greenhouse gas emissions, a couple things. One, it's the job of the EPA and the DEC in New York to regulate the greenhouse gas emissions. It's not the job, if people want to legislate a different entity to control emissions for cryptocurrency mining, that I guess could be legislated, but currently it's the job of the EPA and the DEC to oversee that, and that includes the DEC's oversight of compliance with CLCPA. Everything that a fossil fuel plant, whether they're mining cryptocurrency or not, is governed by their air permit, has to fall within the purview of their air permit, and that oversight's been delegated by the EPA to the DEC. So no one is advocating or expecting that any fossil plant, whether they're mining cryptocurrency or not, would get an exemption from CLCPA. We all fully recognize that in 2040, it's going to be a zero emission grid, right? We own a fossil plant. We fully recognize that. We've never debated that. We've said publicly that we want to do our part to help the state achieve the CLCPA. Passing a moratorium is very different than that. Passing a moratorium is not, the CLCPA is a gradual transition, a rational transition to a zero carbon grid. A moratorium overnight may help achieve that. Our plant, for instance, is 1/1000th. Our emissions last year were 1/1000th of the statewide goals for the CLCPA. A moratorium could eliminate 1/1000th of the, could get you 1/10 of 1% of the way to the CLCPA goals, but would have a major economic impact in a rural community. And I think that's just something that has to be considered when evaluating how we get to a zero carbon grid.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely misleading. And I understand what you're trying to say, but you're talking about in the context of the CLCPA over the context of 30 years, as opposed to the devastating impacts that running a peaker plant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year means for that community, both in terms of particulate matter in the air and hot water going into the Great Lakes. I mean, let's have an honest conversation, right? Like I'm here, I'm listening, but like I'm from Brooklyn. Like don't give me the BS, right? Like we say in Brooklyn, keep it 100, right? And so at the end of the day, what I want everybody to focus on is, again, we're not anti-crypto, and I'm really not interested, honestly, in this nonsense about we can't get the CLCPA without crypto. That's simply not true. And there's no economic analysis that's indicated that, right? And so we can get the CLCPA very well without crypto. I'm not saying that I'm against crypto. I'm saying it's probably a lane for crypto, but please don't tell me that like this is something that we have to have unless, we can't get to the goals, because it's just simply, even the work groups are not considering crypto as part of how we're doing. Last point. The reality is that we have a ecological catastrophe going on. We're literally in a crisis. July 18, 2021, we went to a point of no return in terms of the global warming of the planet, right? And so what we're trying to do here is say, how do we do this? And I'm trying to do this, kind of reframe us back to where I think I'm at least a chair the Energy and Telecommunications Committee interested in going, is how do we do this in a way that is consistent with the CLCPA? What can we be doing to move you off of, if you're trying to convince me that running a peaker plant and continuing to do something that we have decided as a state that we no longer want to do has to be done for the economic health of the state, I don't buy that, right? I think the only conversation to be had here is, what do we need to do as a state to help incentivize and create a smoother path for cryptocurrency to exist in the state, while simultaneously adhering to the principles that are put forward by the CLCPA. Thank you.
Professor Maloney, do you want to give your thoughts on he's sometimes professor, on Senator Parker's view of how do we get the things to be consistent with one another? What could we do to have an ecologically sustainable crypto industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start by saying I think everybody's in agreement that we don't want to burn fossil fuels that are unnecessary. And to hark back to Jeff's point earlier, there are regulations that are in place. I think the first thing we need to make sure is that we are enforcing all the regulations and laws that are in place. And to not put anyone on the spot, but there are regulations around hot water dumping, coolants, tanks, etc. Things that it's my understanding that they've moved forward on, not an expert on the Greenwich site. The idea that we can move this to a green solution is done by tax basis. I don't believe that New York State requires large growth of new fossil fuels to fuel Bitcoin mining. My position has been that it is the existing green basis, and the development of additional green is the way to go with that. One thing I want to comment on as well, and this is back again to the looking across the borders to Texas and Pennsylvania, we have to be very careful on how other states and other jurisdictions classify green energy. If we look across into Pennsylvania, they classify second pump gas and flare gas as green. Not to belabor a point, that is not strictly speaking a true statement. So when we speak about green Bitcoin mining in New York State, we have to be very careful that we are classifying that in the appropriate way. The last thing I'll say, not to belabor the point, I've seen that all of the businesses on this call, and I must, in good, in all honesty, count myself formally amongst them, they are paying large tax bases to the New York State Energy Research Department Authority, or sorry, NYSERDA. That D always trips me up. They want to see green development. They want to see more grid development. That creates a huge job basis, as former Senator Jenny will say. That creating these jobs and being honest about the conversation is the only way that we can work together on this. And everyone has very strong points on this. We can move away from brown energy to green energy in this way.
Thank you. We're going to go Eric Weltman, Brian Bullitt, Addie Jenny.
Hi, folks. Eric Weltman with Food and Water Watch. Everything that we're hearing today is making the case for pressing the pause button and for Senator Parker's important legislation. Folks, there's a lot that's ambiguous and unclear about this new technology. What's not ambiguous is the science and climate change, and so are our moral and legal obligations. New York must move off fossil fuels. Climate devastation is very real. The New Yorkers who lost their lives from Hurricane Ida are the tragic proof. I'd like to very briefly touch upon our perspective on fracking. I've visited communities in Pennsylvania where the gas New York burns is fracked. I've seen the dirty water, I've smelled the pollution, I've heard the noise. I've met parents who are terrified that their children are being poisoned, and they are. Their children are being poisoned. I've seen the devastation that the dredge plant would cause in communities where the frack gas is being violently sucked out of the ground. Again, Food and Water Watch and our allies from Long Island to Buffalo, we thank the Senate for having passed Senator Parker's bill last year, and we have every hope and expectation that you will do so again. Again, everything that's being discussed today is making a case for the Senate passing this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go Brian, Addie, Amanda Fabiano, and Assembly Member Kells.
Thank you, Senator. Just following up on your last question and also Professor Maloney's comments. I do think it's important to acknowledge that there are actors within the state that have taken a more sustainability-minded approach to crypto mining, and those who have taken a less sustainability-minded approach. And we being among the former would encourage the legislature to look to some of the folks who have done things to improve sustainability as partners in crafting legislation and regulation. Our company has actually taken action to remove carbon generation from the grid. So we have a partnership with a company called Block Fusion, also a New York company in Niagara Falls. And together we have taken a former coal-fired power plant, removed the coal generation, physically took the generator out of the building, and it now runs on hydro. So that's a direct reduction to carbon emissions by taking that coal generation out of the picture. And it's now a very sophisticated facility. It employs about 50 individuals in high-paying skilled jobs in an economically depressed region. I also want to touch on, speaking of economics, the financial inclusion comments that Representative Vanel made. I do think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that Bitcoin has promoted financial inclusion for an estimated approximately 8 billion people around the world, in part, as he mentioned, by lowering barriers to entry. And why that has happened is in part because it is a proof of work system. Just this Monday, our SEC Chairman Gensler clarified that in the SEC's view, proof of work is the only technology that creates digital property. Anything else is a security. And securities have a much higher barrier to entry because of the regulation that governs them. That's why the Bitcoin network, based on proof of work, has become the foundation layer that supports this evolving radical internet of money. It's a radical technology. And one more point I'd like to make on that is it stands to bring efficiencies to the existing financial system to reduce its carbon footprint, just like the internet did that starting in the 1990s. If you look at the existing financial and insurance sector, it consumes roughly 10x the energy footprint of Bitcoin globally. And by bringing efficiencies to that system, by taking it into the cloud, there is a promise here and a reality that digital money is going to reduce that carbon footprint for the financial sector. And I don't think we should lose sight of that, because there is a lot of promise with this technology that is aligned with the goals of decarbonizing not only the state, but the world.
Thank you. We're going to go to Addie Jenny, then Amanda Fabiano, then Assemblymember Kelly.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly clarify that base load is what I believe the Greenwich facility is providing. It's not a peaker plant. So in particular, it's going to be 20 degrees below zero this weekend. And we just had a spat of that type of cold weather a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, I guess it may sell more to the grid during those, but it is permitted as a base load, not a peaker. And also that I think everyone has acknowledged on both sides of the issue that the permitting process is not happening in a vacuum, that the goals of the CLCPA are already at play in permitting determinations in this state. So arbitrarily injecting a policy perspective when everyone acknowledged with the adoption of CLCPA that it was going to be a phased approach, it was going to take several years. You know, there may be a need to ensure baseload in the interim. And as it goes down, ensuring that baseload is there is going to be even more problematic if they don't have a place to sell some of that decreased baseload to. I'm also going to point out that there are already mechanisms in place that ensure that the energy that's being generated is going to the consumers first. There's already agreements in place at generating facilities that require these cryptocurrency mining operations to scale down when more is needed to serve the grid. That is sometimes addressed, I think, directly with the ISO. In Messina, there's, I believe, a tariff that ensures that the local users, consumers, are not disadvantaged because there is a crypto operation there needing energy. There's ways to protect our communities and to ensure that they get a first bite at any energy, whether it be green, renewable, zero emission, or fossil fuel. Some of the issues that have been brought up have already been tackled, already addressed, and the protections are in place or could be expanded to be even more widely utilized throughout the state. Yep.
Thank you. So Amanda Fabiano, Assemblymember Kells, Professor Howorth, and Spencer Marr, in that order.
Thank you. So I think that there's this underlying theme here that we're assuming that all crypto miners are bad actors and don't want to work with like the energy and how we need to go in New York towards the CLCPA. I want us to question ourselves, if we're marginalizing one industry, how far does that go? And I think this comes down to the concept of not understanding proof of work and the education piece of it. Things like saying switching to proof of stake, it really does show the limited understanding of the differences, as Mike talked about earlier. And when we talk about this in terms of who is this for, is it for rich people? I want to highlight that yesterday, a single machine mined a block by itself. So one single machine, maybe one person in their house that has a home miner, mined a block. So I think we're generalizing things with Bitcoin mining without understanding it. And I think we need to open the hood and understand it a little bit more.
Okay, we're now going to go to Assembly Member Kells. And welcome.
I appreciate the invitation. Just wanted to jump in really quickly. As a scientist, it's really important for me not to use single examples to identify trends. And using an individual example does not mean that that defines what trends we are seeing. Of course, the probability in a statistical analysis that an individual could actually mine a block is there. But we are seeing an industry that overall that is not in fact the case as far as probability. Those are very, very small. And this is the most consolidated currency that currently exists in the world. If you're looking at the GRE score, I think it has 0.88, and there are about 4 industries that own or have that market share of the mining that exists on the planet. So just putting that in perspective. Greenwich, I had heard a comment that Greenwich is needed for emergency generation, that it is not a peaker, although technically it is not a peaker. Peakers have spool up within minutes. This does not, however, provide a significant amount of energy into the system. It supplies when it is profitable. And given the price of Bitcoin, if you look at the numbers from the facility, the amount of energy that they're selling to the grid is on a consistent decline. So I think that that is also just important to keep in perspective. And there was the comment made about people who are suggesting proof of stake do not sort of understand the scope. And I think it's really important to note that we are right now in the context of over 12,000 environmental scientists telling us that our global energy consumption needs to be reduced by 50% in the next 8 years. If we are looking at all of our industries, using as an example that other industries use a lot of energy, therefore, why are we picking on this one industry? We are looking at one industry that has about 600,000 transactions per day. My understanding, last I looked, there are about 1 million wallets open at any one time. There's been about 10 million wallets for Bitcoin in the last 10 years. So if you're looking at the amount of people that currently actively benefit from this versus the energy cost of anywhere from 100 to 150 terawatt hours as a conservative estimate, in addition to our current global energy consumption, is this where we want to be placing our energy if we're supposed to be reducing it? I've heard the argument of the dollar uses way much more energy. This may be true, but that's not an excuse to add another 150 terawatt hours globally. The priority should be reducing. And I have heard the argument that the currencies should be shifting overall to digital. I do agree. I would say that even if proof of stake is not the absolute ideal model, we have to look at the net benefit. If it is providing a mechanism for digital currencies and it uses less than 1% of the amount of energy, the question we should be asking is it good enough? Given what our needs are. So there's cryptocurrency, and then there's cryptocurrency mining. They are not the same thing. Cryptocurrencies, we can be very pro cryptocurrency without necessarily putting our money into proof of work, which is exclusive proof. Cryptocurrency mining.
Can you just wrap up, please?
Sure, absolutely. So I just want to make that distinction that right now, given how much information, how many questions are still out there, establishing again a temporary moratorium so that we can evaluate these net impacts is absolutely critical for us as a state. So thank you so much for giving me moments to talk.
Professor Howorth, then Spencer Marr.
Yeah, thank you. I too support the moratorium, and if it were just the single Greenwich plant, it's not a huge percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions, as we heard from the facility spokesperson last summer. It was only 0.1% of the greenhouse gas emissions for the electric sector. But I will point out that has been growing, and it's a decent probability that many other old abandoned coal plants could be converted to this. We have them on Cayuga Lake as well as Seneca Lake. I live between Cayuga and Seneca Lakes, and I will tell you that our communities are quite concerned about those possibilities. So if the Greenwich plant were to become a generality, together with the decrease in greenhouse gas emissions that are dictated by the CLCPA, then all of a sudden these plants actually are becoming a significant part of our greenhouse gas emissions. And I just would like to clarify some misinformation out there. The Greenwich plant is operating pretty much self-contained from the grid. The Public Service Commission has actually ruled that they don't have any jurisdiction over it because they're not selling meaningful amount of electricity to the grid. As for the DEC permits, those are in abeyance right now because DEC feels it hasn't gotten adequate information from the Greenwich operators to renew those permits. That alone should give everyone some cause and is a reason to go slow before we allow this to expand to other plants. Thank you.
Spencer Marr.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that fundamentally the process of Bitcoin mining is a commodity-oriented business. In effect, what we're doing is taking cost input, the primary driver of which is electricity, and hoping to sell the resulting commodity output of Bitcoin at a higher price. This naturally creates an economic incentive to pursue the lowest cost of the goods sold. And where we are in a macro energy landscape worldwide is that, fossil fuels exposure to commodities, as we've all seen in the post-COVID macroeconomic landscape, leaves the costs of supply chain and energy, in a completely volatile state. Bitcoin mining creates a natural economic incentive in many respects. In response to Senator Parker's question of what can the state be doing is, in large part, I am for, I'm an environmentalist and an energy focused person. Prior to getting into this business, I was at Sustainable CUNY advising the city and state on how to make the energy system more resilient. My sympathies are there. It was while seated in my office at Sustainable CUNY that I came to recognize that there have been a lot of reasons why we haven't achieved the level of market penetration for renewables we would hope to. There's many reasons, one of which is that in a post-industrial American landscape, there simply isn't the demand for renewable electricity that has a load profile that renewable energy developers can build profitable projects to match the supply of electricity, of renewable electricity with demand. So the fact that Bitcoin mining creates a natural pursuit of the lowest levelized cost of energy and is highly interruptible and a very flat load does, in fact, my argument would actually be proof of work. It's sort of the photo negative of some of the comments I'm hearing here. Proof of work is actually the thing to be invited. It is the very reason that that the pursuit of that economic incentive, because energy is so fundamental to this, it creates alignment of the economic incentives with the ability to create, to become energy generators with zero marginal or near zero marginal cost, unlike in the world of traditional fossil fuels, where you have massive exposure to volatile commodity prices. And so, I'm trying to get my couple of points in here. I would go so far as to say the state should use its widely available public resources, particularly the hydro facilities, to itself become Bitcoin miners and take advantage of these opportunities to arbitrage the cost input and output, and use the abundance of wealth to be created to invest into public infrastructure.
Thank you, Spencer. We're going to go Professor Maloney, Liz Moran, Roger Downs.
Yes, I just wanted to speak briefly on what Senator Kell said. It's often trotted out that there's a huge amount of waste on the blockchain network, specifically the Bitcoin network. That is fundamentally not true. While there are a limited number of transactions on the network, the problem is the Bitcoin network is serving as a clearinghouse. The Central Clearinghouse. I'm having one of those moments today. They only do about 15,000 transactions a day to balance the financial markets in the United States. So 600,000 transactions on the Bitcoin network is a gross magnitude more. The second part of that is we're hearing quite a bit back and forth on the financial aspect. To speak to what Assembly Member Vanal said earlier, this is a market that, quite frankly, disenfranchised, under financially represented, and quite frankly, the youngest of our generation are actively engaged in. And to just turn our back on it would be essentially turning New York State's back on the financial future. It's something that we absolutely must participate in. That is not to say that.
So Professor Maloney, let me ask you this then. So look, you've definitely heard a further argument than just don't use it with fossil fuels. Other people have said we're not even sure that we could meet our CLCPA goals if we're allowing Bitcoin mining to use renewable energy. So maybe we don't see Bitcoin mining having any future at all. However, do you see a moratorium on the fossil fuel use for Bitcoin mining to be turning your back on the industry, or a way forward to say, let's do it, but let's do it green?
I find that the current bill, as it is written, is too broad in scope and would be turning its back on proof of work. Coupling that with New York bit license, you're effectively killing the industry in New York State. The bill could be it could be rewritten to focus on the actual intent of the bill. And I think it could be very easily crafted to focus on turning off non-renewable energy. And I would support a bill that is more carefully crafted to support that.
Thanks, Professor. Liz Moran, then Roger Downs.
Yeah, I want to take a moment to address some of the other environmental concerns that have come up with this particular industry. Some of these are particularly centered around the fossil fuel use for generating cryptocurrency mining. For example, it has been brought up as an argument that some of these facilities are carbon neutral, but that's highly contestable and it does not address the local air quality concerns that are being faced in the community around the Greenwich Generation Station. It does not address the high thermal output of the water. So those are some concerns specific to the fossil fuel use, which it sounds like, generally speaking, there's agreement here that we cannot be relying upon fossil fuels for cryptocurrency mining. But in terms of other environmental concerns that we need to look into with proof of work includes the e-waste component. This is not readily brought up, but it's been estimated that every Bitcoin transaction is the equivalent to throwing away 2 iPhones. We already have a significant waste issue within New York State. So this is something that we feel should be addressed and would have the opportunity to address if there was a moratorium put in place.
Okay, thank you. Roger Downs, then John. Roger, you're on mute.
Sorry, I would just say that in hearing, the description of what the bill should do, it's exactly what it does. It's actually really quite prescriptive in that it calls for a moratorium on cryptocurrency mining facilities attached to fossil fuel generation. I don't think you can get more specific. And I think that there are legitimate concerns. I understand that if you use excess hydro from NIPA, you can call it clean or carbon neutral. But again, let's review the state's goals. I mean, we're going to go 70% renewable by 2030, zero emission grid by 2040. We're at 8% solar and wind right now. And even though we are trying to ramp up, it is slow going. And as Professor Howorth said, we're not only doing that, but we're taking our 2 largest sectors, the building sector and the transportation sector that runs on gasoline and diesel, natural gas and heating oil, and we're going to electrify them by 2040. I mean, that's a 40% increase in our electrical use, all at the same time that we're going to try to make every electron green. Imagine then throwing in a brand new industry that was not conceived during the writing of the CLCPA and saying we have to accommodate that as well. And so, you know, I think for now, I'm sympathetic with some hydro plant owners that are not getting the deals they should from NYSERDA and are making twice as much money with Bitcoin. But that is going to be the base load. That is going to be the battery of our clean energy economy in the future. And we cannot forfeit that to you know, this extra industry. And I think that that carefully has to be looked at. We are looking at, you know, certainly, and I encourage the Senate to pass the bill again, because I think we absolutely have to take fossil fuels, you know, off the Bitcoin landscape in this context. But we have to figure out how we can work with this industry so that we can grow renewables.
Thank you, John.
One thing real quick, Roger mentioned that this is an extra industry. I mean, this is a new industry. And if suddenly, you know, GM wanted to build trucks in Western New York again, I don't think we'd be having the same conversation. So people have innovated and there's something new here. And this is bleeding edge for the financial industry. It's bleeding edge for industry in general. So I don't think we should dismiss it just because it's new. The second thing is I want to talk about the e-waste component. And I think everyone is concerned about that. I think having the legislature pass some kind of requirement that not only Bitcoin mining machines, which have a relatively long lifespan of 5 to 6 years, but that everyone should be recycling. I mean, here in New York, I go out in the street and there's just televisions and air conditioners and everything else is dumped on the side of the road. It should be brought to recycling centers. Those centers should be expanded and all businesses and all consumers should be required to recycle them. I don't think there's anyone in this call, including folks in the industry, who would have a problem with recycling or simply selling in the secondary market and having those secondary users use that to recycle. Recycling is an important component for every industry, certainly Bitcoin among them and Bitcoin mining, but I think we should all be encouraged and in fact, required to do that electronic recycling, which is terribly wasteful. People run through dryers and washers and televisions and game systems in a couple of years and they go in the landfill instead of being recycled and reused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to wind down now. We're going to do Julie, Seneca Lake Guardian, and then ask elected, maybe one more, and then ask elected officials for closing comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to address a point that Liz raised on Bitcoin transactions. I think there's a misconception that as Bitcoin transactions scale, so will the energy consumption. And in reality, Bitcoin's transaction volume is independent of its energy usage, meaning it can accommodate 10,000 or 10,000 times more transactions for the same amount of energy. At Cash App, we allow users to send Bitcoin back and forth to each other thousands of times, and there's no impact on Bitcoin mining energy consumption. And then I'd also encourage folks to take a look at the Lightning Network, which is a layer 2 protocol that's being built on top of the Bitcoin blockchain that lowers costs, increases speed, and lowers the energy usage. Thanks.
Thank you. Seneca Lake Guardian, Mike Collier, Brian Bullitt, elected officials, then we're done by noon.
Thank you. Just regarding the e-waste issue, to my knowledge, the lifespan of these machines is about 1.2 to 1.3 years because they run so hot. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And because the technology is advancing, they have to replace the machines with newer, faster machines in order to be successful. The other thing I would like to point out is that I've heard a lot of the speakers talk about how Bitcoin is driving new renewables. And the point is that New York State, as Roger said, it has some lofty climate goals. We're only at 8%, 9% renewable now. And if Bitcoin mining or proof of work blockchain technology is taking green electrons out of the grid, what they're actually doing is they're actually driving more investment in fossil fuel infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Collier, Brian Bullitt, elected officials, and then we're done by noon. I'm going to keep saying that till we're actually done by noon because we're going to be done by noon. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a quick thought. We've deployed $400 million into Bitcoin mining in North America. Less than 10% of that went into New York. if you put a moratorium on mining, miners are not going to be investing in New York. They're going to go elsewhere. And we're going to severely put ourselves behind this industry, which is the future. And I think it's a really dangerous path to go down. So I believe that I know renewable energy companies are talking to us about building in Bitcoin mining with their facilities. And I want that to happen in New York. I'd rather invest in New York. We're going to double our business in the next 12 months. We're going to add 100 employees. I want to do that in Western New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Brian Bullitt.
Yeah, I just want to flag, I think there's a fundamental misperception that is worth noting, which is the idea that Bitcoin mining is a dirty, energy inefficient industry. It's actually one of the most energy efficient industries we have in this state in terms of if you measure the economic value of the output relative to the energy input. Of course, this varies by company, but on average, rule of thumb, what we see is that for every dollar of energy invested, we get something like $40 of economic output. That's dramatic. So if our goals, and I think we can all agree, our goals are decarbonize the state and promote economic prosperity, then this is an industry that has a lot of promise to do both. If you're going to take, and I disagree, as I said before, about taking a triage approach or having a scarcity mentality about the availability of renewable electrons and putting our elected officials in the uncomfortable position of being asked to arbitrarily pick winners and losers in different industries on how electrons are allocated. The path forward here is clearly creating new generation capacity of renewables. The state's role can be in lubricating the pathway for approvals of that, potentially funding and building the transmission infrastructure that's required. But if you're going to pass a moratorium that unfairly discriminates against this technology, that's very similar to having discriminated against the internet back in the 1990s. The technology is just going to go elsewhere, and the state is not going to participate in the prosperity that it brings and the potential to help with decarbonizing that is inherent in this business.
Thank you, Brian. So elected officials now, if you'd like, you can make a closing statement. And I really want to thank Emmett, Emily, and Hallie on my team for helping to put this together, and for Senators Parker and Savino and for their teams for arranging this, and for everybody here for participating. I think for those who watched this and those who participated, it certainly elevated our understanding of what needs to happen in this state, where we need to drill down, and where the points of contention still remain. So I'm very happy we got together over these last 2 hours, and want to ask any elected officials to make a closing statement if they wish. Senator Savino, would you like to be unmuted? You look like you're trying to say something.
Thank you. I just would like to say this has been a very illuminative listening to all of you. But the one thing is pretty clear. We're still at somewhat of a crossroads. Those of you who are environmental advocates, who are in many ways the stewards of our planet, are very concerned. Your concerns are well noted. And at the same time, it's our responsibility to try and figure out how to adapt as we move forward. You know, there are going to be any number of industries that were not contemplated when the CLCPA was written, and that's going to continue to go forward. Our job is to try and take into consideration the protection of the planet and adapt it to new and emerging industries. And we'll only be able to do that with the input from people like yourselves who are here today. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your input, and I look forward to this continuing conversation and hoping that we keep New York State as not only the financial capital of the world, but also the environmental leader in the country. Because it's just saying no. If, you know, saying no to hydrofracking didn't teach us that, it didn't prevent any other state from doing it. Right across the border, there's still a dirty state in Pennsylvania. So just saying no is not always the answer.
Senator Parker.
Yeah, so again, let me thank my colleagues for joining us today, and thank you all for your valuable contributions to this conversation. And I certainly agree. And I don't think that any of us are trying to say no. I feel like there was two separate conversations being had here today. One of which is trying to justify why we should be doing crypto currency and allowing it to happen. I agree that we should allow it to happen. We should allow mining to happen here. The conversation that we did not get to, that I was hoping that we would get to, is more around recommendations about how do we do this in a, again, an ecologically responsible way, in a sustainable way, something that advances the clean energy economy. And I think that they're not mutually exclusive ideas. And if I thought that they were, it'd be a different conversation. But I'm hoping, this is not the conversation. I think this is obviously the beginning of a conversation that we're going to be having. I invite everybody on this call to reach out to me and my staff. Obule Bello, who's the chairman of, I'm the chairman. He's the, I want to give him a promotion. He just started. The committee director for the Energy Committee in the Senate is on as well. If you can reach out to either one of us with your ideas about things that we need to do. Look, I think the moratorium was in my ideas, and Achilles is on the call, who originated the notion of addressing this issue, and certainly she could speak for herself, but was really just a short timeout while we did an assessment. I think that the timeout is less important than the assessment. And so even if we can get people on this call to get behind saying, okay, let's do a study, and constructing a study around this, that would be, I think, both reasonable and significant in what we need to do in order to go forward. So again, thank you all. I look forward to our continuing conversations and our continued movement on this issue on both fronts.
Thanks, Senator Parker. It's always great to partner with you on energy and climate issues, and I'm glad we could do this today. Assembly Member Kells, just 1 minute, please.
Absolutely, and thank you again for inviting me. I just wanted to close by saying I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. It is a pause and just address a few things really quickly. The sustainability of the materials management, it's reduce, reuse, and then recycle. The recycling industry has been decimated by the removal of China from that industry. So leaning on that, I think, is really important. The lightning tech is nascent, so looking to that to be something available right now. What we have talked about, mining with renewable on site. If the renewable is not on site, it's still pulling from the grid, and our grid is not renewable right now. And lastly, I would just say that the argument, that proof of work is the solution to pushing for renewable energy infrastructure. Bitcoin has the discussion of a significant amount of it being on renewable, but a majority of that came from hydroelectric in China. And when it was banned from China, the amount that was dependent on renewable has reduced, although the exploration, I'm certainly interested in it. I think that we have a lot of exploring still to do, and that was really the drive of this bill. So I wanted to thank you for bringing this forward again, Senator Kaminsky, Senator Savino, Senator Parker. This is a really important discussion, and everyone who is here, pro and con, this is one of the more dynamic and interesting conversations, and as well, reach out to me for further conversations. I'm happy to have them as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Assemblymember. And to close us out, Assemblymember Vanel.
Senator Kaminsky, thank you for putting this together. There are a lot of things to talk about in this space and in this industry, as we see when we talk about, mining, we talk about the investment piece, we talk about the currency side, we talk about the business and environmental side. What's really important is that we're having this discussion and this conversation. We're not going to get to all the solutions today and now, but the fact that you put this together and how you guys are dealing with this responsibly is great. I commend you on doing so. We must continue to have this conversation and bring more stakeholders in on this conversation. Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Assemblymember. And, I think to Senator Parker's point, we're doing this in the first real week of session. Not so much because I thought we'd get every answer, but because I kind of wanted to have all the arguments wash over us. We'll figure out, I definitely have a much better sense of where the pressure points are, where we need to come together, et cetera. And he's right, we do need to find answers from here. But I thought this was a very helpful discussion. So I want to thank all of the fellow elected officials, thank all the staff that helped out today, and thank all the participants for their wonderful contributions. And now let's go use the session to help make our state better, both from an environmental and an economic perspective. And there's no reason why we can't do both. So thanks everyone for being here, and take care.
Ciao, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you, senators.
Thank you.